So again, welcome everybody to our second webinar in our series. We do monthly webinars on various topics. Last month, we talked about special education, or our version of education is special. And this month, this is sort of a follow-up to that. SMART goals in the individualized education program. So really taking a look at the goals and not necessarily how to write them, but how to identify, what a SMART or what a good goal looks like in an IEP. So I am Allison Wiest. I am a parent trainer with Maine Parent Federation. I also, like everybody else with Maine Parent, have lived experience. So I'm also the parent to an 11, coming up on 12-year-old boy with an autism diagnosis. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll turn it over to Dylan to introduce himself.
Thank you, Allison. So hi, everyone. My name's Dylan Campbell, and I have two roles here at Maine Parent Federation. So I'm a youth coordinator and a parent trainer. So I work a lot with young people around self-advocacy and transition planning, but I also work very closely with Allison in the creation of these trainings and the presentation of our materials. As Allison was mentioning, today's presentation is SMART goals, and it really is a continuation of our other webinar, Education is Special. So if you haven't had a chance to view that one, we do have that uploaded on our website. So you can view the session that we had last month, as well as download the slides and a booklet that we have for families. So just kind of diving in today, a little bit of background. We are not a legal service agency, and we do not provide any legal advice or legal representation. So really, we want you to think of this information today as just general information for you and your family. So keeping that in mind, we're not expecting you to be experts today on what IEP goals are or being experts on writing them, but we're hoping that you can kind of understand what a well-written SMART goal looks like. And throughout this training, we will refer back to our Education is Special training quite a few times. So I really highly recommend checking that out and downloading that booklet. So today we're going to dive in, really talking about the purpose of these IEP goals. So what do they look like? What are they there for? And how can I understand it better? What is the process of IEP goals? So we're hoping to help parents understand what the process of developing these goals is, and specifically using the acronym SMART as a way to identify what a well-written goal looks like. So hoping to bring that information to families to understand when a goal might need to be rewritten. Since we are a webinar format today, I really want to keep this as interactive as possible. So please feel free to use the chat box. But I'm curious, what has been your experience in developing IEP goals? If you want to take a moment, I'd be happy to read them. But, is that more like a team approach? Do you find yourself acknowledging strengths or maybe weaknesses? What about addressing concerns that are confusing? And we'll come back to that. So feel free to post that. But really kind of diving into that first section here of the day. So what is the purpose of these IEP goals? So really, they're there to fulfill that federal special education law, IDEA. And again, we go into detail in our first training a lot, but IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that's the federal special education law that oversees all things special education. Really, and with these IEP goals, what we're trying to do is provide a free and appropriate public education. So again, in our first training, really that free and appropriate public education is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a free and appropriate education provided at a public institution. And really with the goal of these IEP goals is to provide that to our children, to make sure that we're receiving a free and appropriate public education. And we're also there to ensure that our children with disabilities are supported and provided with the necessary services and accommodations that they need. So really these IEP goals will identify, what that support looks like, who's providing that support, and really what that entails. And thank you for for the chat
Yeah,
below.
I just put something in there. Again, I know nobody else had shared anything in the chat box, but I was just saying that I think, again, from a parent's perspective, a lot of times we feel like I just had an IEP meeting yesterday, so it's very fresh for me. So again, as parents, sometimes we feel like we don't always have input in the goals. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, no, and it's such an important piece as well. As parents, you are an equal member, so it's important to know that you can speak up and you should, and you are an expert on your child. So yeah, thank you. And really, as we're kind of diving into a little more detail about these IEP goals, we're really trying to consider the big picture. So, taking a look at the student as a person, as a whole, in their community, in their school, and, taking a look at what, their weaknesses, successes, their strengths, weaknesses, and challenges are. So really to do so, we're trying to create a long-term plan for achieving academic and functional growth within the school setting. And we'll dive into what both of those mean, but we're taking into consideration their academics and their functional growth. So really, as we're trying to, think about our goals for the future, we want to lay out our long-term goals and our short-term goals, and then outline the steps to really reach those goals. And I think the takeaway I want you folks to take away from this slide here is just when we talk about long-term goals, it's understanding that it's a longer set of time, but it shouldn't be indefinitely. So if there is a goal that may appear on an IEP, consecutive years, maybe that's an area that you might need to consider rewriting to better fit the needs of the child. So
Dylan, can I just interrupt for a moment? There was a comment that the chat is not working. Is there a way to enable that?
there is, so it is in the quiet group today. It's just my lack of technical. So there you go. Hopefully that works now.
Thank you for mentioning that to us. So
Thank you so
again,
much.
that happens sometimes. So you should be able to use the chat box now if you want to provide any comments. Yay!
Appreciate that. Just a second ago, I was mentioning academic and functional goals. So really, as we're creating our goals for our kiddos, we should identify, what would the best impact be? So for their academic goals, we're really trying to consider their learning curriculum. So how does that student's disability impact their curriculum and learning within the general curriculum? So how does their disability negatively impact their ability to access the curriculum in the mainstream classroom? Functional goals, on the other hand, this is really considering the different functions throughout the day. So how does the student conduct their day-to-day relationships, like communication, social emotional skills, motor, cognitive, and adaptive? So you're really trying to consider both of these areas when we're creating goals for our kiddos. And these goals should really align with the main learning results. And what that is, the main learning results are really the 8 areas that the state of Maine uses for standards in the state. And thank you for the chat box, and thank you, Allison, for managing that. So what are the goals? As we move along here, this is actually an acronym that I want you to be familiar with. So we are going to describe the present level of academic achievement and functional performance, or the present level of performance, PLOP. And these 2 acronyms here, PLOP is the one you may hear more often. But these are really, determined on, past assessments, recent evaluations, classroom observations, and it really states their present level of performance. So where are they currently performing in their levels of academics? So this is really where we're going to identify and create those specific measures to support progress for the future. So it's identifying that baseline for where that student is currently at. You have anything to add to this piece, Allison?
Oh, sorry. I was looking at the chat again. Not at this point. Sorry, sorry, Dylan.
No, you're
I
good.
think
I see
again, I
the
think
chat.
Dylan spelled it out, and I think I'll talk about it a little bit in some of the other slides. But again, PLOP kind of being an acronym that we use, or that you'll hear in IEP meetings, and basically that is looking at where the student is currently. And again, I think Dylan probably said this, so I apologize if you already did. But again, plot being necessary in order to create goals. Like we need to know where the student is currently in order to develop a goal, right? So that's all I have to add. And sorry if that was redundant. So all right, so I'm gonna take over here. So we're looking at an actual IEP. And actually, before I get into this, again, I just wanted to, because there's been some conversation in the chat, mention our education is special webinar or booklet, taking a look at that so that you are familiar as a parent to, again, you don't have to know all the laws and regulations of special education, but important to know some of the basics, and again, some of these acronyms and deadlines and things like that. So just to follow up on the chat, an IEP meeting is due to be done at least annually. And again, parents can call a meeting, an IEP meeting with the team at any point if there's, any needs that need to be, if you have any concerns, you can call a meeting at any point as a parent. So, because you are an equal member of the IEP team. So just wanted to mention that. Okay, so we're looking at an actual IEP here. This is the template that is used by Muser. Muser is the mains regulations for special education. So this is a form that's used statewide. Again, as Dylan had mentioned, looking at goals for academics, as well as, I think maybe in the next slide, functional goals as well. So we'll see, you can see here that present level of academic performance, that's the plot, the measurable goal, the objectives underneath to reach the measurable goal, and then over to the right, there would be progress dates. So progress reports are done at least as often as a mainstream student's report card. So so dates would be over to the right, showing the progress dates. So this is also a filled out IEP. So again, what we were looking at before is the templates that is used statewide. This is an actual completed IEP. We're looking at academics here. So again, the present level of performance, we're not identifying any students here, so that's why that's blacked out. So we're talking about currently where they're at, what the student is able to do, and then underneath that is the measurable goal. So in this particular case, by January 2021, given specially designed instruction, which again, for those of you who aren't familiar, specially designed instruction is special education. So if a child has an IEP, then they receive specially designed instruction. In the area of mathematics skills, will increase her usage of functional life measurement skills to compare, represent, and describe relationships to objects, time, money, cooking, and calendar skills with 90% accuracy, 3 out of 4 consecutive sessions as measured by the student's work samples and teacher-created assessments. So that's a really long goal, but it's very specific, and we're going to talk about this as we go on. And then you can see over to the right, as I mentioned, the progress dates. So those are the dates that this goal will be reviewed, and the the person that's responsible for delivering the specially designed instruction will make their progress notes. Here is, so again, here is the objectives. So again, we're talking about that main goal that we had, and then here are the objectives. So the objective by January of 2020, I'm not going to read the whole thing, March, and then it goes on, and again, it correlates with all of the progress dates. And then this is the template for the functional and developmental performance. So again, we have the academics, and then we have the functional. Again, same template laid out the same way. And again, just, I think Dylan probably said this, but when we're talking about functional, we're talking about, development, social and emotional. I'll share that again, my son just had his IEP yesterday, and we added some functional goals because he is going to be going to middle school next year. So really thinking about like his independence and his organization. So some of those executive functioning skills that he needs to learn. So we added some additional functional goals to his IEP in preparation for him to move from elementary into middle school. And then again, here is a completed form. It's a little bit flip-flop, but again, looking at that functional development, you can see the present level of performance. So where the student is at currently, that's where they're performing. And then underneath that is the measurable goal. Again, this one is on speech and language. So it's a little bit hard to read, but by January 1 of 2021, given direct instruction focusing on core language used during scripted language. Sorry, this is really small, Dylan.
Sorry.
I need my readers on, I think, to read it. But you can read that measurable goal in the slide. And then again, the objectives underneath with the dates for the progress. So again, thinking about academics, number one, and then secondly, thinking about functional and developmental goals as well. And feel free, if you have questions about that, to drop them in the chat box.
Yeah, and downloading the slides may make it easier to read, so you can.
It's probably just me and my old eyes. All of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, all the letters are jumbling together." So I apologize.
And just I think as something to put out there, if you have a child here and you currently have an IEP, your goals may currently not look like that, and that's okay as well. So really, I think the goal of this training for Allison and ourselves is to help parents understand, hey, okay, maybe this is the time that we should rethink this goal, or hey, I have some concerns about this one, or maybe there's some rethinking we could do about this goal. It's more about identifying what doesn't work versus creating your own goals. And I think that's important to keep in mind for families.
And again, I think Dylan just hit on a really good point, and I neglected to say it, is that, and we may talk about it later on, but if a goal continues to stay on an IEP year after year, like that's not a working goal. That's not a well-written goal. So again, hence why it's really important to meet at least annually to look at the goals to see if they, number one, are they well written? Are they achievable? So again, as parents, being able to identify and recognize whether the student is along with the rest of the IEP team, whether they're meeting those goals or not meeting those goals, and then how can we rewrite them so that they are a SMART goal. So thanks, Dylan, for mentioning that.
Yeah, no worries. And I think it's also, as we're kind of, going through here, it's important to know that, you're not expected to know how to write goals, but in understanding that, you are an equal member. And what that means as being a parent and an equal member on the team, that also means you're, being an equal member and contributing to writing these IEP goals. So, really you amongst the other team of special educators, therapists, regular educators, administrators, and sometimes the student, you're really there as a team to help build these goals, help write these goals. And then decisions are really made on that team consensus. So I think with this slide, just keep in mind that as an equal member, that also means you also have an equal opportunity to contribute to writing these goals. And you should, as a parent, you should contribute that information. We always like to say, as a parent, you are an expert on your child. So that's, you can bring information that the school might not have. And otherwise, the school might have information on your child that you may not have as well. So really being a team consensus. And referring back to the beginning there, that acronym I want you guys all to remember is I need to have a quiz, Allison, at the end of each training for my acronyms. Yeah. But the goals should be written using their present level of performance as a baseline. So of course, to measure anything, we need to know where our child is currently at. So for each area of concern, we should have at least one goal written. And that can be neither reading, writing, math, or social and emotional. It's really the areas of concern for that child. And, as really, I think, keeping up the theme of this, goals must be measurable in order to track progress throughout the year. So in some of the examples that we just showed you a few minutes ago, they were really specific in what progress should look like. So it's identifying, how do we know that we're actually making progress? So what is that metric? What are we tracking to identify whether progress is being made? So that's the measurable piece. Really, it's supposed to also map out the timing of progress reports throughout the year. Like Allison had mentioned, it should happen at least as often as the mainstream classrooms. But on that right-hand column in the progress, that's where it will usually label the different progress dates. So dates that we're going to be looking at this again, reviewing. But also identifies who is responsible. So, we've talked about the what is going to be provided, but also who is going to be providing it. So which team member, which staff member is going to be identified to carry those goals out. And then I think the biggest piece of all this is that these goals are unique to each student. So just because a student has a similar diagnosis as another student, it doesn't mean their needs are the same. So their goals should be very different, and it should be written to meet, what they need. So their unique needs. Anything to add to that piece?
Not really. I think that, again, I'm glad that we have in here. I was thinking to myself as I was sitting here about, again, just mentioning that every student's, IEP is going to look different for every student, regardless of if they have the same diagnosis. And then the other thing that I was thinking too is that, again, when we're talking about involvement of creating goals, that again, as a student gets older, that they really should be involved in the writing of their goals too, right? Because again, we want these goals to be, we're going to go through the acronym in a minute, but we want them to be achievable. And so sometimes, the school thinks that they might, they know what the goals are, or the parents do, but then also having, especially for a middle school or high school student, having them involved in their goals, I think is really important too. And we do mention that in some of our other trainings, but it popped into my head as something else that also the student can and should be, as they get older, involved in their IEP and in writing the goals as well. So here we go. We're talking about the acronym now. So SMART, the S stands for specific. So we want to make sure it's specific enough. Again, when I went through that goal, there was a lot of language in it. So again, we really want to make sure that it's specific. We want to make sure it's measurable, as Dylan mentioned. So again, we want to be able to take a look at the present level of performance and we want to see progress, right? So we want to see that it's measurable. We want to see that it's attainable. I mentioned that as well. Again, if a goal has been on there too long, then maybe we need to rewrite it. Results oriented, and then time limited. So again, we want to make sure that it's not sitting on the IEP for a really long time. And a lot of times you'll see on your IEP under the progress, maybe a goal was written in January, and then in March, there's been progress notes, and maybe the student has partially met the goal. So maybe instead of, 80 out of 100 times, they're meeting it at 50 out of 100 times. So they're partially meeting it. So again, having that time limited there can show also the progress that's happening. So again, specific progress is easier to track, right? When we're working towards a specific goal. So again, using data, observations to really help create an appropriate and specific goal. So again, a lot of times there may be assessments that have been done. We're looking at present level of performance, so where a student is at currently. Maybe there's been some observations either by, the teacher, speech and language, or even as a parent. So again, as a parent, you can say, again, I feel like this is an area that we'd like to, have my child work on, or this is an area of concern. And granted, like Dylan said, you don't need to write the whole goal word for word, but you're bringing up the topic that is specific, that is a specific current concern for you. So again, really thinking about who, what, when, why, where, and how. So again, writing a very specific goal, and you kind of saw that in the the example I gave you. So again, thinking about who, that might be the OT. So what, maybe the child needs a sensory diet. They are seeking out different types of sensory, they have sensory needs. So when are we going to provide them with that? 2 days a week at 30 minutes. Why are we doing that? Again, because they have some processing, they need that sensory input in order to regulate or process information. Where are we doing it? In an OT room? And then how are we doing it? One-on-one instruction. So again, that's just sort of, those are the pieces of that big long goal that I was talking about. Dylan, anything else that you want to add to that?
No, I think that covers most of it.
So we're going to take a look at a goal. So we do try to be a little bit interactive in this one. So mom and dad's goal is that Adam will be a better reader. So thinking about how we can make this goal more specific, that's pretty general. But again, that's what, as a parent, right, where we'd come to the table and we'd be like, okay, Adam's, not reading at grade level, or, we're really concerned about Adam's reading. So again, as parents, we bring this up. We can work with the team in writing a goal, but a goal should look more specific. Adam will be able to read a passage orally in a grade level book at 110 to 130 minutes per minute with 80% accuracy 3 out of 4 times. So again, you can see how that's a very specific goal.
And then so the M in SMART goals is measurable. So really this is how we're going to track the progress. So an IEP must include steps to measure students' progress towards the higher goals. And this data collected will serve as evidence that the goal will be achieved. So really, how are we going to use that child's present level of performance to establish that baseline that we can then measure from? So really, to make a goal more measurable, we want to kind of think about, we want to specify performance at grade or age level, really based on those objective tests. So there's an implied baseline, and then indicate a rate such as 5 minutes out of every 10 minutes or 3 out of every 4 times and a percentage of accuracy. So we want to identify the different levels and then identify a metric such as a ratio, such as provided here. And really, the goal of being measurable is to identify what changes in behavior we're expected to see as progress is being made. So how do we know that we're making progress? What need is the goal addressing, and what will that progress look like? So how do we measure that? My animations are backwards, Allison, not what I was. And so I also have an example for this one. So let's take a look. Mom and dad would like Emma to be able to solve math problems with the help of a calculator. How can we make this goal more measurable? So Emma will be able to solve math problems that involve the computation of fractions and decimals with 75% accuracy with the help of a calculator. So we didn't change anything else about the goal, really, but identifying that metric. So when she's using a calculator, she should be able to identify fractions and decimals with 75% accuracy, or 3 out of 4 times. So that is our measurable piece. That's how we're tracking progress.
So the next piece is attainable. Again, we want goals that are attainable and reflect realistic progress that the student is capable of achieving, right? We want to stretch them. We want to see progress, but we also don't want a goal to sit there and not be attainable and the student gets frustrated, or, again, they're not meeting their goals. So a goal really needs to be written within reach for the student, but again, stretching a little bit as well. And again, looking at academics and functional goals. So here is an example. Jackson will write at grade level with no errors in spelling or punctuation. And I'm thinking to myself, like, is that really attainable? Like, no errors, like 100% accuracy, or any of us 100% accurate? No. I know I am definitely not 100% accurate all the time. So Jackson will write a paragraph with at least 5 sentences. each greater than 8 words and with no more than 2 errors in punctuation. So again, we can see that, so no errors definitely is not attainable, right? So in the second, the second goal here, we're allowing for error, right? Again, we want it to be attainable. We recognize that 100% accuracy is challenging. So it's more specific and it's more attainable.
And keep in mind as well, for each of these examples that we're giving, there's an implied baseline for the child. So for each example, the present level of performance has already been established, and the example goal was then built off of that information. So really identifying that plot before building the goal. So, really the R stands for results oriented. And these goals that are results oriented clearly state what a student will need to do in order to achieve it. So goals should be realistic and within the student's reach, and this should be relevant to the student's needs in areas of academic and functional performance. So the goal should make sense, right? If your kiddo is struggling in reading, but they're excelling in math, you wouldn't have a math goal there. So it should be really relevant to the student's needs, what they're for the academic and functional needs. So here's an example of what that might look like when we're writing a goal. So during small group activities, Dana will have good eye contact with others. So how can we make this more results oriented, so more relevant to her? So during a small group activity, Dana will look at the speaker of the group 90% of the time in 4 out of 5 opportunities. So there we go, a little bit more results oriented there. We've identified what we're trying to look for in this goal here.
So time limited. I did see there was something in the chat box, and we can address that after we get through this. So time limited. So each goal should include a time limit in which the student will achieve it, right? Because again, how do we measure progress? So again, a goal can sit there for a really long period of time. So we want to make sure we have a time limit. So again, it allows for the review of progress and adjustment to the goals if necessary. Time limits are objective measures for which data can be collected and evaluated. So again, if you need to collect data or you need to evaluate a student, again, why it's so important to have that time limited piece. So let's see. So Jeremy will be able to orally explain class vocabulary words with 90% accuracy, 8 out of 10 tries. His progress will be measured through a language assessment. So I think at first glance, sometimes this looks okay, not too bad, right? We do have some specifics in there, 90% accuracy, 8 out of 10 tries, a language assessment to see where he's at. So again, at first glance, this looks pretty good, but how can we make it time limited? And all we've done is add by May 15th. So again, we're putting a time factor in there. So now we're again able to measure it, able to by May 15th, has there been any progress made? Do we need to adjust the goal? So just by adding May 15th, we've included that time limited piece.
And so I think a big thing of this is just taking a look at goals that are already there and putting this acronym to it. So is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable, results oriented, or time limited? So really asking yourself those questions for each of the goals. And I think that can help make a lot of progress here. So this slide here, we're kind of bringing it all together. So the starting point is, it's a very common goal that I think a lot of parents have. So my son will learn how to read. So maybe a first level of that goal would be George will learn how to read at the 5th grade level. Okay, it's getting a little better. So we've identified George reading at the 5th grade level. So that's where we want to be. So how can we change that a little bit more? So after 1 year of individualized tutoring each day, George will read at the 5th grade level. Okay, so we're being a bit more specific. We're identifying some of the steps that we can take to achieve that. We're identifying the metric that we want him to be at, but we haven't really identified what that metric really is yet. So after receiving individualized tutoring for 30 minutes each day, George will read at the 5th grade level with 80% accuracy as measured by the global composite score of the Gray Oral Reading Test by June 20th, 2021. A mouthful, but that goal has all the acronyms. It has, it's specific, it's identifying the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. It's measurable, so we have the 80% accuracy. It's attainable based off that established present level of performance. It's results oriented, and it's time limited, so we know when we want to achieve this goal by. So it's really, I think, as you're taking a look in the future and in past your IEP goals, maybe ask yourself, does this align with the SMART goal acronym? And maybe that can be an area, if it doesn't align, maybe that can be an area where you can focus on.
Again, I think just to piggyback on what Dylan was just saying, like, as parents, you're not expected to write a big long goal like that, but being able to recognize the components, those acronyms that we just talked about, being able to dissect the goals that are on your student's IEP to see if all of those pieces are in there. If they are all in there, then great, you have a well written SMART goal. If they're not in there, then maybe that's something that, again, you and the rest of the IEP team needs to take a look at to see how it can be, again, either more attainable, more measurable, more time limited, whatever, more results oriented, whatever it is, or more specific. So again, just being able to dissect it and see those different components, I think, is important for parents.
Absolutely. And it's not, I guess, just this acronym as well. You can use this all across your life. It's not just for IEPs, but really this is any goal. And a lot of the work that I do with my youth is I have 2 youth groups as well. But we actually, in the past few weeks, we actually started working on this together, writing SMART goals. So identifying a goal that a young person might have, and then applying the SMART acronym to it. So it's not just for IEP goals, but this is a great area where you can use that to identify if it's well written. Allison already mentioned this, but I'll just read on the slides here. Really, as we're doing this, we really want to use up-to-date scores to develop the goals. So always making sure we have the most recent information, because that will be the present level of performance as the most recent. We want to write goals which are reasonable for your child, not too easy, not too challenging. I was going to mention earlier, but I can never say it right. But our executive director, Carrie, always says something along the lines of, if we set the bar too high, our children will never reach it. But if we set the bar too low, then they won't have the satisfaction of completing it. So we need to know where to set the bar for our kiddos, and that's where it comes in for each student. It should be individualized for them. And then also making sure that the devised outcome is stated clearly. So going back to the S, the specific, we always need to be specific about everything. So the who, what, when, where, why, and the more specific we are, hopefully the better progress that we can achieve from this. So really just making sure that it's all brought together.
And I just wanted to say too, like, again, just to kind of keep in mind, goals technically should be attainable within that year. Again, IEPs are typically annually. And so, again, if a goal is on, it's been on there 1 year, and then the next year you have the next IEP, and the goal is still the same, and progress isn't being made or even partially met, then something is, again, it's missing the mark somewhere. It's not specific enough. It needs to be rewritten, or again, something needs to be changed. So I think that's a good rule of thumb. If you see a goal on there and you have your IEP and progress isn't being made, no, they haven't met, and then it's the next year for the next annual IEP, and the goal is still there and nothing's changed, that's a problem. So taking a look at it and figuring out how we can rewrite it, would be necessary. So.
Yeah, and this training and this acronym, this is not like a formula to write a goal, but really, hopefully, it's a mile marker, or a way for you to really learn. So hopefully a tool for you folks. We also have a couple of resources here for you. This first one here is a goals chart. This second one is a questions checklist. I haven't looked at them in a while, so I honestly can't tell you what they are. But this one here is from understood.org, which is an agency, which is a group that I always use. They have a wonderful website. I'm a huge fan of their work at Understood. All of
Yeah.
this year, you can feel free to reach us and contact us. We're on social media, so Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, and YouTube. And we have our website there, so I highly encourage you to check that out. We have all of our trainings and webinars there. And there you can also download our different slides. So if you haven't had a chance, please go check out Education is Special. This was our webinar from last month, and it's really a broad overview of special education in Maine. And it dives into the specifics a little bit more than we did today.
Yeah, and again, I think for those of you who haven't seen the webinar or the booklet, again, it does give some more detail on some of the specifics of the law, the federal and state, and again, just tips for parents.